Baseball has been one of America's pastimes for generations. Now, there are MLB teams all over the country, and Detroit is no exception. We are all familiar with the Detroit Tigers, but did you know that there was another important and exceptional team that played baseball here in the D? They were called the Detroit Stars. In honor of the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues, we are going to talk about one of the unsung stars of baseball, and his name is Turkey Stearnes. Hey, welcome to Detroit History Heroes, the show where we explore the stories of some fantastic Detroiters. My name is Kayla, and I work for the Detroit Historical Society.
My name is Dean, and I also work at the Detroit Historical Society. Kayla and I are so grateful for all of the feedback and support you've given us over these past 4 episodes. And so today, we wanted to join forces and do something a little special for the last episode of the season.
But don't worry, we'll be back with an all-new season very soon. Now, let's jump into it. You may have heard of Jackie Robinson, the player who famously integrated Major League Baseball. But that wasn't his first big break. He had actually played professional baseball for 2 years on a team called the Kansas City Monarchs, which was one of the teams in the Negro Leagues, a league of professional baseball that was specifically created for African American athletes. We take it for granted today, but there was a long period in our history where professional sports were segregated, which means that white players and black players and players of color couldn't play in the same teams or even the same league.
Although the practice of slavery was technically banned after the American Civil War, life for newly freed black people was far from easy. You might be familiar with the phrase separate but equal. This came from an 1896 Supreme Court case called Plessy v. Ferguson, in which the US government came out in support of racial segregation. These types of regulations and rules were commonly known as Jim Crow laws. The main purpose of these laws was to keep black and white people separated. They controlled how and when black and white people could interact. There were even rules denying African Americans the right to gather in public. This federally approved policy of segregation made it nearly impossible for black people to interact and engage in public life.
But baseball's color line was established long before separate but equal was the law. Baseball, with some exceptions, experienced de facto segregation. De facto basically means there aren't any laws or rules that tell you how to segregate. It's just the way society operates. For example, here's a quote from the 1870s. Baseball players do not burn with a desire to have colored men on their team. In 1887, 8 years before Plessy versus Ferguson, some of the most popular players in the Major League threatened to quit if George Stovey, a black player, was made the pitcher of the New York Giants. Segregation sucks, kids. This led to the first contracts that explicitly excluded African American players from playing in the major leagues. This explicitly targeted African Americans, as both Native Americans and Native Hawaiians were allowed contracts. But just because African Americans couldn't play in the white leagues didn't mean they couldn't play professional baseball at all. At first there were smaller teams that would play exhibition games, but in 1920 Andrew Foster created a league specifically for black players, what we now call the Negro Leagues. Negro League teams started popping up all over the Midwest, East Coast, and Southern states. There were teams with names like the Chicago Giants and the Louisville White Sox, and here in Michigan we had the Detroit Stars. The Stars were heavy hitters in the Negro Leagues, pun intended. Why don't we get a little bit more hands-on with the story? Hey Dean, I think it's time for a field trip.
The Detroit Stars played right here in Hamtramck in what is today Veterans Park. The Detroit Stars were founded in 1919 by Rube Foster and Tenny Blount, just a year before the Negro Leagues were officially formed. The team played from 1919 to 1931 and won 2 championships.
It wasn't long before the players began attracting large crowds of integrated fans who flocked to the stadium for home games. It was the players' skills that attracted these folks, and one of the players, Turkey Stearnes, was a fan favorite.
Norman Turkey Stearnes was born in 1901 in Nashville, Tennessee. And not only is Nashville the country music capital of the world, but it's a city that was so richly influenced by its African American community. It's actually home to 4 different historically black colleges and universities. In fact, the streetcar boycotts that happened in Nashville during Stearnes' childhood would actually go on to inspire the Montgomery bus boycotts that would happen half a century later. In his youth, Stearnes played ball just like any other kid would, but his skill and love for the game made it clear that he was destined for greater things. He started playing on a variety of teams in the South, like the Nashville Elite Giants and the Montgomery Gray Sox. And in 1923, his performance during these games caught the eye of Bruce Petway, the Detroit Stars manager. Stearnes moved to Detroit and joined the Stars that same year, balancing his new baseball career with a job at Briggs Manufacturing Company.
Stearnes was primarily a left-handed outfielder, but that wasn't the only position he could play. While he didn't look as big as some of the other players in the game, Stearnes was a powerhouse at bat. In 1923, his first year with the Stars, he hit 35 home runs and 50 home runs in the year following. One of his fellow teammates, fellow Hall of Famer Cool Papa Bell, once said of Stearnes, "He was one of our best all-around players. He could field, he could hit, he could run, he had plenty of power." There was no doubt about it, Stearnes was one of the game's best players. But baseball wasn't the only thing that defined his legacy. In fact, why don't we let someone who knows his story best tell you? It's time for some flash footnotes.
Thank you so much for being here. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Okay, I'm Rosalind Stearnes Brown. I'm the oldest daughter of Norman Turkey Stearnes, the Hall of Famer, and that's my dad.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your dad was like as a person outside of his baseball career? Like, what was he like as a dad?
He was the type of dad that a lot of people should have because he loved his family. And he was the type of man that you could talk to. Dad was my best friend. Dad supported us in all our endeavors. My sister and I are both musicians. My sister taught deaf and hard of hearing, and I'm a music teacher. Both of us are retired. And Dad was just a great human being. He was not only a great baseball player, but he was great as a dad and a husband too.
Can you tell us and talk a little bit about how your dad's baseball career affected your life?
You know, growing up, and a lot of my friends tell me that's because our block was one of the best blocks, I think, in the city, because like they say, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's what happened. All of the neighbors was friends, and they took care of the kids, and Dad was supportive of that because we knew if we did anything, you know, it would get back to Dad. And that wasn't so good, okay? With his baseball career, we didn't know how good my dad really was until we got to be adults, because we knew that Dad played Negro League baseball, and we knew we had visits from Satchel Paige. When he came to Detroit, he would stop by and they would talk. And we thought these guys was just sitting on the porch shooting the breeze. You know, we didn't know that we were actually listening to history. And then we found out later, you know, then people became interested in Dad, and sports writers started coming to the house wanting to talk about Dad. And then we got people that were interested in getting him into the Hall of Fame. And we're like, oh, wow. We knew Dad was great as a father and a husband, but now we find out about his baseball career. People always ask us, do we have any memorabilia? And we say no, because when we were playing ball, Dad would give the kids you know, if they needed the gloves and the balls and stuff, we had the equipment, we would just give it away. We didn't know we were giving away money, because, you know, now that people are asking for that, we realize that that would have been a part of the stuff that we should have kept. But we didn't know that he was going to end up in the Hall of Fame and how great he was as a baseball player. I'm just appreciative of what's going on to carry on my dad's legacy. And now I'm writing a book about him. So, and I wish I had done this about 20 years earlier, but it's okay. I always say better late than never.
From what you know about your dad, what would you say was the thing he was most proud of?
I think Dad was most proud of us because he was a family man and he liked what we were doing, especially being musicians and educators. And he always stressed that it was important for you to get your education. I can't say enough about my father because I wish all men were like my dad.
I can feel the love even radiating through my
Yeah.
screen from you.
He really was. He was the type of man that you could have a lot of respect for.
Did your dad have a favorite team he played for or a favorite place he got to visit when he was traveling?
He didn't talk a lot about traveling. He just talked about baseball in general. And he was a really quiet guy. So in order to get my dad to talk, if you wanted to talk, you had to talk about baseball. But I think he really liked playing in Detroit because he was a big baseball fan here. When he died, Ernie Harwell said at one of the games, Tigers have probably lost one of their best fans because my dad went to every Tigers home game.
Why do you think that representation in professional sports or any sort of entertainment of any kind, why do you think representation of Black people and people of color is important to see?
Especially now, I think that's important because Black people have contributed a lot to this country, and we actually helped build this country. And I always say, where would this country be without us? Not just sports, but in every field. And it's important that we carry that on and we let people know that we are as much a contributor to this country as any ethnic group, because this country was built on our blood, sweat, and tears. There's a double standard in this country for Blacks and whites, and it shouldn't be like that. We're all in this together, and we should all be treated the same way. My dad never worried about what he couldn't do because of the color of his skin.
What do you hope his legacy is?
But see, that's the kind of thing that our kids grow up, they need to see and to hear about how good these people were, so it would motivate them to be just as good or better. And they need to see people that are the same ethnic background that they are, that they're doing great things, because they hear so many negative things about us, and nobody concentrates on the positive. I would like to see his legacy continue. He had the best attitude. He played for the love of the game. And in spite of his circumstances, the discrimination, he managed to rise above that. You see this picture with my dad in his suit, and he's swinging a baseball bat. And people always ask me, what do you think was going through your dad's mind while he was standing there? And I said, I really think that he was saying, I finally got a chance to swing my bat at Tiger Stadium. And those are the kinds of things that I would love for people to know that he was just a great all-around human being, as well as being a great baseball player.
Although the Detroit Stars were his primary team, Stearnes would have to leave in 1931 due to some financial trouble the team was facing. He moved on to play with the Chicago American Giants and later the Kansas City Monarchs, clearly becoming an asset to both teams. In 1935, when he was playing with the American Giants, Stearnes' batting average was one of the highest in the entire league at .430. When he shifted to the Kansas City Monarchs, his speed and strength earned the team 2 consecutive pennants in 1940 and in 1941.
As time went on, it became clear that the Negro Leagues were a bastion for baseball talent, and mainstream Major League Baseball started to notice too. In 1947, Jackie Robinson became the first Black player brought on to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers, which officially integrated the team and Major League Baseball broadly. As more Black players were brought on to integrate teams across the country, the reasons for a separate Negro League started to dwindle. Stearnes, for his part, never actually played for a Major League team, but that didn't seem to bother him.
Dad was never bitter about not making it to the major leagues. He had the attitude that he was playing for the love of the game. He really loved what he was doing, and he was really good at it. And he just appreciated the fact that he could play.
America was truly sleeping on this baseball legend. It wasn't until the year 2000 that Turkey Stearnes became one of the few Negro Leagues players to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, cementing his skill, sportsmanship, and legacy in America's favorite pastime for generations to come.
The Negro Leagues and its players made strides that led to the racial integration of Major League Baseball with Jackie Robinson. Those in the past have paved their way forward for us to continue that important and necessary work.
It's up to us to acknowledge injustice in our communities and speak out against them. We can follow in the brave footsteps of men like Turkey Stearnes and Satchel Paige and Hank Aaron and Cool Papa Bell and Jackie Robinson. We can take the lessons of their bravery and use them to fight injustice wherever we can.
Thank you all so much for watching this season of Detroit History Heroes. We've loved sharing these Detroit stories with you. And a special thanks to Miss Rosalind Brown for taking the time to talk to us for this episode.
Let us know which Detroit history hero you want to learn about next season in the comments down below. And if you want to learn more about baseball history, you can visit our website at DetroitHistorical.org.
Hang out with us on Facebook at Detroit Historical Society, follow us on Twitter at DH Society, and Instagram at Detroit Historical. That's Kayla.
And that's Dean. And this has been Detroit History Heroes. See you next time.